Hi, Peter Robertson here with another Market Minute update. Today's topic is deposits and finance clauses and how they interrelate with each other through the process of a transaction. Very topical at the moment because people are going through a lot of change in their circumstances, in their lives, and we are seeing some situations where a person has applied for finance, the finance has been approved, but then the finance gets revoked. And the question then comes down to what happens with the real estate contract and the deposit. Alright, quite simply, it works as follows. If I make an offer on a property that is subject to finance, I get my finance approved by my lender, and that finance is always subject to their standard terms and conditions, and I give that notice of that finance approval to the real estate agent. That finance condition on that contract to purchase the property is deemed to have been satisfied. Now once a condition is satisfied, it can't become unsatisfied. But what can happen is the circumstance of the buyer changes, the bank reassesses them and says, sorry, things have changed. Under our standard terms and conditions, we are hereby revoking that finance approval and we're not going to give you the money. The buyer is usually at that point reasonably distressed, and because there's usually other things going on that have created that change in circumstance, and they want to go back to the real estate agent and the seller and say, sorry, my finance just got revoked, the deal's falling over, I can't proceed, can I have my deposit back? Now, don't take this as legal advice. I'm not a solicitor, I am a licensed real estate agent, so I'm just trying to put some general context and understanding of our normal real estate contracts and normal joint form of general conditions that go with it. So what can happen under that circumstances is the buyer is asking for the deposit back. The seller doesn't have to give the deposit back. The seller can hold up to 10% of the purchase price, and then has to go through various restorative steps to resell the property. 10% rule. How does this work with deposits? Well, you could just dovetail this in here. If I pay more than a 10% deposit, and that happens, the seller can retain up to 10%. The balance of the deposit has to be returned to the buyer. The seller is now sitting on 10% and has to take the property back to the law is that the seller must take the property back to the market within the next 12 months and try and sell the property for the same amount of money. So make the best endeavour to not end up with a loss. Let's play out scenario A. Scenario A is the seller resells the property for the same price. Great news. The first buyer gets their deposit back and the seller proceeds with the new deal. Scenario B. The seller can't sell the property for the same price, sells it for less, an amount less, whatever that amount might be. The first buyer is liable for the difference in price between their contract price and the second contract price. If it's 10% or less and the deposit covers it, usually that's the end of the matter. The first buyer has lost their deposit. The seller has not suffered a loss as a result of the difference between the transactions, and they proceed with the second deal. If the seller resells for an amount that is more than the deposit, the differential between the first contract price and the second contract price is greater than the deposit they're holding, not only do they keep the deposit, but they have the right to pursue the first buyer for that difference. So that's where the term restorative comes into play. So the law is about seeking to restore the loss suffered by the seller as a result of the first deal not proceeding. So if you're a buyer that's got a deal that's subject to finance, and you find yourself in these circumstances, I thought this would be useful to know. And certainly if you're a seller dealing in the marketplace and you have a buyer comes to you and says, sorry, I had finance approval, it's been revoked, can I have my deposit back? I think it's important for you to understand the options open to you and how the rules and what the law is around this. So hopefully this little market minute around deposits, finance clauses, changing circumstances is relevant and useful and interesting for you to understand as we deal through this very disruptive space at the moment. and work our way through it. So hopefully this is of use. Thanks for listening. Any questions, of course, dial in and give me a call. If you do find yourself in a pickle and in a dispute with a buyer or a seller, I would always recommend that you go and get legal advice. Don't rely on this video at all. This is just simply to give you a sense of the lay of the land and the rules around it. All right, take care out there, and we'll see you on the next video.